Believe it or not, war doesn't have to be about conquering things. It can just be spinning the wheels for the war companies. Like, there's a lot of that happens.
I was in like a bad mood or something.
Yeah, ACD was in a bad mood, laying on the bed.
I think I was having period pains.
No, you weren't, because you did not have a pad. Otherwise, this
would not happen.
This is very specific.
It's very graphic.
Yeah. But ACD was laying on the bed, had a shirt and underwear on, and I was using the dustbuster. I was cleaning stuff. I was just cleaning away. And I noticed ACD's butt was in a position that was just like completely perfect to put the dustbuster on it and dustbuster butthole.
This makes you sound like a serial killer.
No. Everything was clean.
Well, I just remember like...
You were furious.
Like, and that's not something I would like ever get furious about.
No, normally you would find that very funny.
Yeah,
but you were
not
in a good
Peter
mood.
did it. Like that's like not something that I would like be. But
I mean, that fits right in with the sensibilities I know you for.
Yeah, and I was just...
You were furious.
I was I'll try to emulate the face. I just looked up like...
You were like...
I was so...
It was like Tucker Carlson's face whenever he responds to anything.
It was. Like, you did it better than I did.
That's because I saw it.
Yeah. I recovered.
Yeah, well, obviously you recovered. Like,
I laughed like 15 seconds later. I had to be self-aware enough to realize what a bad mood I was in. Had I not been in the AA fellowship, I don't know if I would have taken it.
So anyway, yeah, you could have farted at that moment and it would not have stunk because I would have sucked the air through the dustbuster's filter. And you did not take that opportunity. You just got mad at me for some reason.
I didn't know.
I did you a big favor.
It didn't give me enough time.
I gave you a gift.
You
could have farted with pure immunity.
We always fart with pure immunity in this house.
Fair.
Because anytime, except for Gooby, anytime somebody farts, it's immediately followed by, I farted, sorry.
Or did you hear my fart?
Yeah.
Oh, holy. It's not so bad. Smells like discipline.
Girl farts don't stink.
You're an NB, though.
But sometimes I'm a girl.
You're a girl whenever you fart.
Yeah.
It's NB, non-binary, unless I'm farting, and then I am a girl.
I am a cis woman.
I'm a cishet white woman when I fart.
I acknowledge my power and privilege when I fart.
Assigned fartless at birth. That's what AFAB stands for. But anyway, the dustbuster. So yeah, tighten your buttholes. It's time for Pact.
Wrap it up.
I'm the P. Peter Coffin, the lovely Miss Astronaut Cowboy Doctor right here, who I scared with the dustbuster a second time a moment ago.
I'm easily frightened.
Got you in the butt and got you on the pod. This is the ACD. Together we are Pact.
Good job.
Yeah, it's English language. That's just my first language. That's all. Don't miss an episode. Like, comment, and subscribe. Give us a glowing review on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever weird thing you use. We are a 5-star podcast.
Not 3, not 4, 5. I'm a 5-star man.
Join our Discord. We hang out there all the time. We chat. We do some other fun stuff that you can access by becoming a patron. There's movie night, reading group, exclusive content, and some content that you just see before everybody else. So help us keep the lights on by becoming a patron at patreon.com/pactpod. That's PACDPOD. We have got fantastic Pact merch available as well. Visit our website, pactpod.com for that. Finally, tell your friends we rely so big on word of mouth. We stream 7 p.m. Eastern every Sunday. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Yeah, let's
CPI. We're going to be at the CPI event in Austin.
Center for Political Innovation.
There's an event on Saturday in Austin, Texas. I don't know if it's going to be streamed, but our presentation is going to be recorded, and it will be the next episode of Packed after this one. So we are going to be at the CPI event with our friend Caleb Maupin. Our friend Caleb Maupin recently was labeled state-affiliated media by Twitter.
Like a couple days before he stopped working for Russia Today.
Russia Today, a few days later, just closed shop in the U.S. They're like, it's really hostile. I don't know if I want to do this anymore. They just packed up and hit the road. So it's very clear that they didn't care that he was employed by RT until the Ukraine situation began, because that's when they labeled him. That's when they decided to do it. And RT shut down, laid off Caleb and all of the other people that worked there.
In the U.S.?
So Caleb is now unemployed. All those people are now unemployed. Still labeled state-affiliated media.
Mm.
Twitter has not changed that label. But what does state-affiliated mean?
Yeah. Russia Today, for example, is a nonprofit corporation.
Yes. Its parent company is called TV Novosti. It is an autonomous nonprofit. It is actually not part of the government. Mm-hmm. It is funded by the government.
They receive a substantial amount of funding for the government. And that is what, I suppose, the standard for Twitter assigning those labels to people who are affiliated with those organizations. Again, not just those organizations themselves, but employees of them, or I guess now former employees of them.
Yeah.
Receive that label.
NPR is also, they don't use the words autonomous nonprofit, but it is an autonomous nonprofit. It's a nonprofit. It's not a government organization. It's funded by our government. PBS, same thing. It's a corporation. It is a nonprofit corporation, but we don't see these same labels on
NPR.
PBS. So Caleb, who is an individual with less than 30,000 followers on Twitter, has a little label on there that nullifies absolutely everything he says to a certain demographic of people.
Most people in the United States.
Yeah, well, because everybody's like, state-affiliated media. Doesn't that mean propaganda? So I went to NPR's Twitter account. NPR has 8.8 million followers. This is their general account. The main one, at NPR, is the account. Has no label on it. Nothing that implies that they take funding from the government. Nothing that implies they're affiliated with the government in any way. However, they are, in exactly the same way that RT is.
We didn't even look into the BBC. How is the BBC funded?
BBC is actually state media. It's owned by the British state.
But it doesn't say that?
Let's look it up real quick. Nope.
Nice.
At BBC, which is actual state media, actually owned by the British state, no label.
So not only are they not applying this consistently, they're just selectively without, other than, being bad states, according to Western propaganda, they're just applying it selectively to whatever they think is in the interest of the Western world. So not only are they not applying this consistently to media institutions that receive state or federal funding, just selectively antagonizing non-Western, non-imperial core states with these little nullifying labels that qualify the statements of, again, not the organizations themselves, even the individual employees working for them. There's also this piece that, being funded by just private capital is not biased or not incredibly influential and disseminating a specific media narrative.
Well, first, we've been sort of trained our entire lives that state media is bad. Mm-hmm. It's authoritarian. It's always going to follow the state's interests. And there's some nugget of truth to that. A foreign state-owned media outlet does have different interests to a domestically owned state media outlet. Now, it's not automatically one way or the other. Yes, could a state-run media thing be totalitarian? Sure. But why can't a capital-owned media outlet be the same thing?
All capital-owned outlets are totalitarian because they're specific.
What?
The reason that they fund those things is to disseminate their specific message.
So there's this book written by Noam Chomsky with Edward S. Herman, and they created a propaganda model, which they did a bunch of case studies to prove was a viable model for characterizing the U.S. capitalist media. Not the state media.
Yeah.
In fact, they actually didn't really concentrate on NPR. There's a lot of New York Times study in this book. So if New York Times is consistently blurring the lines between truth and reality, and we can easily use Iraq as a case study without even getting into that book, we can say New York Times was instrumental in manufacturing consent for the Iraq war. I went back through, and they are shocking. Yeah. They are pure propaganda. Knowing that they're untrue and going back to it and seeing it.
Alarming.
It's blatant. It's so blatant. And here's the thing about the manufacturing of the consent for that war. Whose interest was that in? Capital. Like, to do imperialism, you have to have a financial monopoly and you have to have dominion over where resources come from.
Right. It's Iraq, the continuous partitioning and repartitioning of the world until it's over.
Yes. Yes. In the interest of capital, we needed to be able to go into Iraq to take control of Iraq's oil production, essentially. We have various companies in the United States which make lots of money when war happens. Believe it or not, war doesn't have to be about conquering things. It can just be to be spinning the wheels for the war companies. Like, there's a lot of that happens. But anyway.
And it's been happening.
Yeah, it's been happening.
We just haven't been focusing on it because it's not helpful for the United States narrative to do that. But it's very helpful to force Russia's hand in this reactive state that they're in, which Chomsky himself has been talking about.
He's actually been contextualizing it with the history of the region, which is weird.
Yeah.
But the question is, if these wars are in the interest of U.S. capital, and they're the ones that are pushing for it and doing the manufacturing of the consent with the capitalist-owned media, why aren't news outlets and employees and former employees of those news outlets forced to disclose that they work for those outlets?
Or more specifically, what it would be like is to say state-affiliated media. That wouldn't even be like saying, I work for MSNBC. That would be like saying, here are all the funders of MSNBC.
Yeah, who actually...
That is what it would be like. It not even just what organization do you work for, but who is funding that organization.
Well, it'd be General Electric. It'd be General Electric affiliated media. Because General Electric, and by the way, General Electric's a huge war contractor. Let's just keep that in mind. General Electric started NBC and incorporated a large amount of other companies, including Comcast, eventually. Mm-hmm. And those media outlets operate in its interests. Now, if you remember a literal second ago, I said that often war is conducted specifically to spin the wheels of the war companies to make money. Well, if a company that makes tons of money off of war owns a media outlet, one of the largest media outlets in the country, shouldn't we slap a label onto that? Shouldn't we know? Shouldn't you have to think about that every single time you see a news outlet post something on Twitter? If especially some random former employee of a state-affiliated media outlet.
The Russia equivalent of NPR.
Yeah. Why isn't it like that? A popular thing I see liberals say all the time is that politicians should have to wear jumpsuits with all of their sponsors on it, like a NASCAR driver. But I want to know why that isn't a thing in the media.
Unless you're Russia or China. Then you have to wear the jumpsuit that's just like receiving funding from your country.
Yeah. When you think about it that way, though, NASCAR drivers are more transparent and honest than our media. People who are driving a car around in a fucking circle 100 times in a day are doing more to disclose who they work for than anyone in the US media, which is consistently working towards an agenda that often kills many people, exploits many more, and nobody says anything about it because it's private.
Rock, flag, and eagle. So there's beyond double standard applied to countries in the imperial core and ones that are either non-imperialist or anti-imperialist countries, or a threat or a perceived threat to the interest of the United States within the stage of capitalism that we're in imperialism. The threat of a multipolar world, which jeopardizes the position of the United States. Those things are labeled as being qualified due to their affiliations with their respective states. Whereas media in the Western world, so to speak, that has its various funders, that is designed specifically to disseminate the interests of those funders, have no obligation or no even pressure or top-down coercion either to reveal their funding sources. The reason for that is because within the imperial core and everywhere else, but especially within the imperial core, the relationship between the state, monopoly capital, and finance capital are all so deeply and closely intertwined that to reveal that state affiliation, corporate affiliation, capital affiliation, what have you, is to jeopardize the economic base off of which the Western imperial core subsists.
Absolutely. Well said.
Thank you.
So what is a state? If you ask somebody who actually observes qualitative differences between things and uses those, then what a state actually is, according to Ingalls, is the mechanism used to uphold the class contradictions. It's that simple. It's an apparatus that maintains the divide between the owning class, the ruling class, and everyone else. So the primary contradiction of capitalism is the socialization of production and the privatization of the product and profits. Somebody owns the means of production. Tons of people walk in and use it and create a product. That product goes to the person that owns the means of production, and whatever profit they can generate it also goes to them. That's the primary contradiction of capitalism. That is the thing that the state exists to uphold, because that contradiction defines class in capitalism. If you own the means of production, you socialize production, and you retain the product and profits, you are bourgeoisie. If you are not doing those things, if you're a worker, then you're a worker. You're proletariat.
Right. So if you are demonstrating your sources of funding as a media outlet in the Western imperial core, you're saying, hi, I'm here to oppress the working class.
Yeah. Yes. Like there's this really fun thing where people like to define fascism as the merging of corporate and state interests. And in capitalism, that is present from the very get-go.
Yes, absolutely. And fascism is capitalism in decay, so they're not totally wrong.
They're not totally wrong, but that's not like the defining characteristic of fascism. It's a characteristic of capitalism.
Right.
This is where things start to click and make sense and come together. When a capital-owned media outlet is advocating for war, whether or not they're owned by a company that will benefit off of war, I mean, they all are, but but making the assumption that they aren't, they still benefit off of war. They still benefit off of any imperial action, because all of that maintains the class contradiction that keeps those companies in existence. We are in a stage of capitalism, monopoly capitalism, moribund capitalism, decaying capitalism. That's imperialism, just to be clear. And without war, without these other characteristics of imperialism, this would all be breaking down. It is breaking down. It's always breaking down. It has been breaking down. The fact is, the state is used to maintain imperialism, to maintain this apparatus that is just barely held together by fucking gum, paper clips, Band-Aids. It's something that they have to work to keep. So here's the thing. Capital-owned media and state-owned media ultimately have a very similar, if not exactly the same agenda.
Well, in the imperial core, they do have the exact same
Yeah,
agenda.
exactly.
So it's almost, I don't know. Is Twitter cynical or just stupid?
Does it matter?
No.
If the result's the same, it doesn't matter if they're cynical or stupid. And here's the evidence. The New York Times, which we've mentioned a few times during the course of this podcast, put out this news story a couple of days ago. The headline is Fact and Myth-Making Blend in Ukraine's Information War. This article is about how there are various things that have been accepted as truth regarding the Ukraine situation, and a number of them are not true. This article justifies this. It tells us that that's not really that bad. It's not a bad thing that these untruths are being spoken.
And perhaps it might be important.
Yeah, it might actually be important for the morale of the Ukrainian people. You see, the Ghost of Kiev may have been video game footage, but it made everyone feel great.
When the fact-checking website Snopes published an article debunking the video, some social media users pushed back. Why can't we just let people believe some things? If the Russians believe it, it brings fear. If the Ukrainians believe it, it gives them hope.
We actually mentioned this in the last episode with Fox and Alex, the let me have this.
Yeah.
It's the New York Times saying, just let me have this.
Right.
So you've got merged interests between capital and the state. The state exists for capital. It is an apparatus at the service of capital. It's that simple. The agenda here is imperialism. It has to be the official narrative. We have to push it. And if anybody pushes back, those are the bad guys. Meaning, when something out there resists the imperial narrative, it is misinformation. When it assists the imperial narrative, it is blending fact and myth-making, and it's good for morale. If you're going to label an individual who doesn't even work for a media outlet anymore, state-affiliated media, the reason ostensibly you're doing that is to make sure that people know that that person is attached to a certain agenda. That's not what's going on here. But if that's the stated reason, you need to do it for our state-affiliated media. That is the NPRs, which are exactly the same as Russia Today. And you need to do it for capital, because capital, it is the state.
Yeah.
The dynamic of imperialism puts the American bourgeoisie, because it's an American empire, it puts the American bourgeoisie as the ruling class of Earth. And every piece of media that serves capital, that is owned by capital, that is affiliated with capital, serves the rulers of Earth. Don't you think we should have a disclosure for that if we have a disclosure for anything? If resisting the narrative that they're forcing on you, if questioning things is so bad that you get a label saying that you're a bad man.
The bastard man.
You're a bastard man. You're questioning this stuff. Don't question
Caleb
this.
is asshole.
The funny thing about that too, if we had to disclose all of our funding, we wouldn't have any to disclose. We're saying this because we're critical of the mainstream imperial narrative. What are they going to label us?
I don't know. People keep trying to bring up that they're like, disclose your funding, Peter. And it's
I have none.
What the fuck? We live paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah. We are not a funded media outlet. Like, there's this one person who's been replying constantly to me on Twitter being like, you need to fill out this form. Yeah, I disclose my funding in the credits. The credits is literally the funders of this show. Those are the people who fund this show, and we disclose it. To sum up, this whole thing is massively inconsistent. It's specifically used to marginalize narratives that don't support imperialism, and it doesn't actually have anything to do with whether the person is affiliated with state media or not.
No, it's selective to what supports imperialist interests.
If you're part of Ukrainian media, apparently you can blend fact and myth making, and it's cool. Good stuff. Just let us have this. But if you're critical, then I guess you're bad.
We're going to tell everybody.
And that's it for Packed. Thanks again for watching or listening. I'm Peter. This is Miss Astronaut Cowboy Doctor. To help us out, click like, follow, subscribe, join our Discord, leave us 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. To support us, become a patron at patreon.com/packpod. That's PACDPOD. Thanks so much. Come back next week.